Hi there, trauma dietitian Kathleen Putnam here, and we're here to talk about trauma and inflammation. You want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. I'm Ginger Hultin. I'm a Seattle-based registered dietitian of Champagne Nutrition, and I wrote a book about inflammation. And I'm really excited to talk about how that nutrition inflammation overlaps with some of the work that you're doing that is really relevant to a huge audience.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about what trauma is and how it could be related to inflammation. I called Ginger because I read some research about how early childhood experiences can actually cause some of these markers for inflammation to go up regardless of our lifestyle, regardless of what we're doing. And so we'll talk about that and how that's linked, what those numbers look like, and then also talk about lifestyle interventions and the anti-inflammatory diet and some resources. Is there anything else you want to add?
Well, I'm really excited to talk about the markers that you mentioned because that research is super interesting. And I get asked over and over and over, how do I know if I'm inflamed? So, if you have trauma, if this speaks to you, then you can take steps to figure out if this is affecting you and what to do about it.
Yeah, great. So what we're talking about is those early childhood experiences where maybe it was your family was food insecure, maybe there was someone in the household that had not predictable behavior, there was addiction, there was abuse of any kind, or just chronic stress. Maybe you were moving around all the time. There was economic insecurity. So we're talking about chronic stress over a period of time. And this can impact development for sure in a child, but it also can impact us older in life when we have chronic disease. And so as we look at COVID, we'll learn more and more about how this rolls out. So when we're talking about trauma, it's that chronic stress condition, and I invite you to listen to the other videos and get more resources on this too. But what's super interesting to me is the data. What it's showing is that unhealthy dietary habits, our choices, chronic disease, and poor health conditions may be a result of the trauma, the adverse childhood events, and not our choices. So a lot of times when we get diagnosed, I'm sure you have this, Ginger, where people look back and they go, what did I do? What did I do wrong? And start to think that it's their fault. We need to open this up and see, wow, this could have been because of this chronic stress.
Yeah, gosh, people ask me that all the time. Like, is it the pizza that I ate? Is it the wine that I drank? Like, what did I do? Is it something that I did last week? But what I think we need to understand is that there's a huge runway, and yeah, it's not your fault. It might not be anything that you did, but there can be some things that you can do to nurture yourself to try and pull out of it a bit.
Yes, yes. And so that we now know the impact that it's having on the body and what are the interventions now that we know we have those markers. So the markers that came up in this research, and again, it's just preliminary research and I'm not a researcher, but I'm super interested that with childhood trauma, there are increased inflammatory markers. And those are the TNF, tumor necrosis factor, the IL-6, and the CRP. So Ginger, are these things that people are looking at when they're looking at inflammation? And can you tell us more about what these markers are and how they're related?
Yeah, I mean, they should be looked at, I believe. And I've worked in a lot of places that they are looked at because I've worked in a lot of integrative wellness. But I would say they're not like average. If you go to your doctor and say, draw my blood, those aren't typically going to be drawn. CRP is the most common, right? It's like, they might just draw a blood panel to see what your white blood cells are doing, but that doesn't tell you about inflammation. Can I go through those three a little bit and talk more about them?
Yeah, please.
I just think it's really important that people understand what these are and what, if they're relevant to them or not. So CRP stands for C-reactive protein. It's a protein released from the liver, and it's a marker of general inflammation. So it doesn't tell you where it's coming from. So if you had an ear infection, or if you had COVID, or you had something acute, it's going to be high. And high is going to be anywhere above about 3. So you want low inflammation, you want the number to be low. But I was talking to you earlier, I see people get diagnosed at like 10, 15, 20. CRP that high is really significant. And so what you want to do with CRP, because it changes rapidly, is get a baseline test. your doctor will probably be like, sure. And then, if it's high, retest, talk to your doctor within 3 to 6 months to see if it's chronically high.
Yeah, wonderful. So I know that in the research that was published, it said that the markers don't respond as high and as dramatic as acute stress. Okay. And I think that the way that we have to kind of be thinking about this is it's new territory. We're starting to really appreciate childhood trauma and chronic stress and the impact that it's having on health. And also that we're really good with acute acute conditions. We're having this, we had an accident, we have inflammation, we see the markers. So it's this more subtle increase. So you might not have dramatically high, but you might have chronically higher than what you want over time. And if you have, higher amounts of inflammatory markers, what's happening? What's the concern?
Right. And what you're saying, it makes so much sense. So maybe you don't have a CRP that's like 20, but maybe, I had a client get diagnosed at like 8. Why is your CRP 8? Why is it not 1 like it should be? Like, what's going on? So what that means when you have a high, chronically high inflammatory markers, it means that there's something irritating going on in the body. That could be, some sort of like chronic disease, like diabetes, cancer, heart disease, but it also could be stress, trauma, emotional issues, lack of exercise, smoking, a chronically poor diet. There's a lot of things that can cause that.
Okay, good. There's a lot of associations that are related to that. And then what's so interesting to me, Ginger, is that, that whole thing of thinking that something's wrong with us. And this is one of the main things, or that I did something wrong. One of the main reasons why I want to get out and talk about trauma and what it does with our health is that, it might be not have anything to do with our behavior, but really how we experienced and our bodies experienced trauma, is that 80% of us lie to our doctors. And so a big part of that is being able to have the conversation. So how do you have the conversation with folks about this so that they don't feel the shame that comes with elevated levels? And I'm just going to turn on my mute while the garbage truck's here.
No worries. Yeah, it's really interesting because what I talk to my clients about is we just need data, right? It's not judgment, even with cholesterol or some of these markers that we tie to like our personal success or failure. Blood pressure, cholesterol, it's like I'm good or I'm bad. So really reshaping that even with inflammation, which is just, where are we? So if you've got a high CRP, like I said, that's the most common lab to draw, and you have a couple of them, I think you do need to be talking to your doctor. A lot of times when you have inflammation, you don't feel well. Something's wrong inside. I feel tired all the time. I'm in a lot of pain. Like, what's going on? At that point, you could advocate for yourself to say, there are other inflammatory markers, IL-6, TNF alpha, like you were talking about, or tumor necrosis factor. And just say, is it worth looking at some of those so I can see if it's just a CRP issue or if I have, lots of different inflammatory markers going up, because the research is showing all of those can be affected by just trauma alone.
Right. So the way to start thinking about it is that, we're not even totally sure. We're just starting to make these connections ourselves. To be validated in the research. I think a lot of people have a hint about what's going on. And it's just so important when you go to talk to your physician, your dietitian, your therapist, your physical therapist, whoever you might be working with, that you feel safe and that you feel like you're being offered choices, and that it feels like there's collaboration and that there's autonomy, that like when you leave, you don't feel like you've been lectured or told what to do, and that you feel like, your dietitian and your doctor is a trustworthy resource and would be open for you to get a second opinion so that you can feel secure and comfortable because it's your body, and that you feel empowered to make the choices that you want. And that's really trauma-informed care. And it's really about figuring out how you're experiencing things, like what you said, fatigue, not feeling good, what could this be? And then also to feel like you have some action to be able to take forward. So let's dive into what can people do if these markers are up? What do you feel like? I know this sounds so cliche, but what do you think are like the top 3 things that you go over a lot with people and you feel like, oh yeah, these are the big ones? And
Yeah.
it could be the top 5.
Sure, sure. There are a lot. I mean, there's a few things that just do need to be addressed at a baseline. Smoking
Mhm.
is one. So, like, smoking is one of the first things I'll talk to people about. If you're doing that, it's
Right.
extremely inflammatory.
Yeah.
Same thing with excessive alcohol intake. So, if you're struggling with alcohol use disorder, if you have overconsumption, if you're smoking, like those things are toxic to the
Mhm.
body. That's one of the first things I'll address with people, and then secondarily, it's funny, I'm a dietitian and so are you, but we talk about non-nutrition stuff all the time. I talk about sleep,
Yeah.
right? If you are chronically sleep deprived, you're going to be inflamed, and all the blueberries in the world aren't going to fix that, is what I tell my
Mhm.
clients. So
Mhm.
we look at sleep, we look at any obvious toxins, and then I do start to work on the diet. So those are my top 3, well, gosh, maybe top 4. Physical activity, right? So
Yeah.
if you're sedentary, we really need to get you moving, because that alone can bring inflammation down. So those are like my top 4. And within the diet, we can talk more about that. There's a lot of different things we can do.
Perfect. So I love what you're saying about sleep as being a source of chronic stress, not getting enough sleep, and then definitely getting the support that you need around the behavior part with smoking and drinking. And again, you feel like you're in a safe community, that you're not being judged, that you're actually moving toward being able to make those changes. Um, when you talk about the physical activity, what I love about that is even in the short term, when we're experiencing chronic stress, any movement at all is helpful for the hypo-aroused response to
Mm,
trauma and stress, and the hyper-aroused. Any kind of movement is helpful. So when we think about exercise, I want you to just think about any kind of movement that you make. And it is good to make it more routine. So it's routine physical activity, or that there's a routine way in which you're building that into your life, which I think during COVID, we started to see people get really a lot more flexible with this.
right.
Either they stopped exercising or they found ways to walk, and the gyms closed down, finding ways to walk and exercise and bring home gym equipment or use their own body weight to do some exercises.
Yep. I can't tell you how many people talk about just walking or running or getting outside is such a stress reliever, and really,
Mm-hmm.
like, that's a huge reason that my clients do it in the first place, but it can make a big difference.
Yeah, great with the inflammatory markers. Yes, absolutely. Okay, let's go ahead. One thing that I want to say before we dive in is, with any of these recommendations, one thing that we know about with trauma is that when we start looking at things and wanting to make a shift, is I highly recommend focusing your goal, because goals can feel traumatizing too, that
Mm,
we're good or bad, or, it's easy to get into that all or nothing thinking, is to think about the behavior change being the goal.
yeah.
That my goal really is to walk,
Mhm.
7 days in a row, or it might be, get to bed by 11 o'clock at night. And one of the things that can be re-traumatizing or can exacerbate the chronic stress is what I call unhealthy guilt, where
Mm,
you're actually holding yourself to not very rational, pretty irrational, high standards. And then when
mm.
you don't meet them, then you're not getting the benefit. And so it's really also about the mindset. Have you found this at all with your clients?
For sure. One thing that we talk about, and tell me if this is what you're talking about, is all or nothing mindset.
Yes.
Like, I am a
Hmm.
success or I'm a failure. I'm good or I'm
Hmm.
bad. Like, I hit my
Hmm.
goal or I'm nothing. And so moving out of that is probably one of the most powerful work that I do with patients. I'm sure you're the
Hmm.
same.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think, or it could be, well, the weight didn't come down, or
Yep.
my resting heart rate didn't come down, or my blood
Yep.
pressure's still high. And there's other things that are impacting that. And so I want to just open it up that you're benefiting no matter what. And it's really the consistency that becomes a problem with behavior. That's why people aren't able to keep it up. So I love using James Clear's information around just do 2 minutes. Just commit yourself to 2 minutes of something every single day,
Mhm.
so that you have a way in which, if you don't do it, it's not that big of a deal. And if you do it, it doesn't take that much more of an effort. But what we know is once people start with 2 minutes,
Yep.
of a commitment to something and can stay consistent, that's where the behavior change starts to happen. So being realistic and setting up the expectations in the beginning that feel realistic. And I think one thing that again, with healthcare and being trauma informed, is we can set people up, right? To say you need to be, we can just give the guidelines versus asking the questions about what's realistic. Where are you at now? What's realistic? What do you want to try? So again, you feel empowered. And I'm giving that example in hopes that you can find somebody that you can work with, that you have a relationship like that.
Yeah, I think especially when you're dealing with trauma, dealing with anxiety, depression, that sort of thing, and healing, the long-term relationship is key. It's not
Yeah.
just like a meeting once. It's really about sticking with it over time so that you become empowered to change your habits, and then you can fly on your own. But just knowing that it's not an overnight thing and you're trying to change a lot in your life and it requires a relationship.
Yeah. And so that you don't feel alone,
Yep.
because the antidote to shame and stigma is compassion. And so
Yeah.
that you don't feel alone, that you've got this human body and it's not supposed to be perfect.
Right.
Like, these are just standards in which we have associations with disease. I mean, we don't even totally have high blood pressure figured out, why people have it, why other people don't have it. We have all
Right.
these associations, so a lot of things we think of as a cause and effect, and really it's like the impact it would have on me and the impact it would have on you may look totally different. So we're trying to master our own body and how we respond to things, and then to really be consistently kind. And so to make sure that when you're in a relationship with a healthcare provider, you do feel like there's kindness and that you're treated with respect. Yeah, it's so important.
You've said that a couple times, and I just can't agree more. One of the major things that I do with my clients is I ask, do you feel respected by your doctor? And I love doctors. I think they're awesome. I partner with a lot of them, but unfortunately, a lot of my clients say, no, they didn't hear me. They weight shamed me. They, wouldn't draw the labs that I wanted. They weren't listening to me. They were rushed. And I encourage people to find different practitioners, that they jive better with. That could be your dietitian, your dentist, your personal trainer.
Yeah.
It could be anybody, but you need to have a partnership. And I think people just really need to advocate for themselves for this.
I do too. And I offer coaching for that. I know you do too, with like, this is how to bring this up with your doctor. This is how to have this conversation with your therapist. This is how to have your conversation with your physical therapist. That could be anything. So let's get to the nutrition part. Again, let's go to the food piece. About what would you say are the top key factors for an anti-inflammatory way of eating? Now that we've talked about drinking, smoking, sleep, is there anything else I'm thinking of?
Exercise.
Exercise. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep. Especially like I have my pillars of the anti-inflammatory diet, but when I'm especially thinking about people that have trauma or people that are trying to just, deal with a lot going on in their lives, on their plate, one of the most powerful things we can do that I start with is eating on a regular basis, right? Like in this world of intermittent fasting being so hot, I just find that a lot of people don't do super well with that, and it can stress the body and be an irritant. So the first thing I'll do is work with my clients to get them on a schedule of like anti-inflammatory breakfast that you prep ahead, balanced lunch, maybe you eat the same one every week, that's fine, and a dinner that you and your family enjoy. And we can talk about the anti-inflammatory principles, but looking at getting anti-inflammatory foods on a regular basis throughout your day can be one of the most important things that people do.
I love what you're saying, because that's true with trauma, is the structure and routine and the predictability. Then it takes the choice and the decision out. You know when you're going to eat,
right?
You know when you're going to go to bed, you know when you're going to be physically active. That routine was really disrupted through COVID.
Yep.
And to get that routine back really helps keep the stress down of the decision-making process and the worry and feeling a little bit out of sorts and rushed.
Exactly. I had talked to so many people that are just like, I don't know what to eat. Like, I don't have anything in my house. I didn't think ahead. I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm stressed and I'm making choices that I didn't want to. So, eating an anti-inflammatory is it's pretty simple. It's about eating more fruits and more veggies. It's about eating plant-based proteins like beans and tofu. It's about, using herbs and spices. It's about adding things in, whole grains, chia seeds, flax seeds, nuts and seeds. So really, it's just about thinking about what you're going to eat, eating on a regular basis, and weaving those delicious foods in more often. So a lot of people are like, oh, what do I take out? But I talk to them about what to add in. That should be the focus.
Yes. So whole foods as much as possible, fresh fruits and vegetables, which this time of year it works great. And then to have things in the freezer and to have those pickled items, on their
Ah,
counter, and your canned items. You and I are big into convenience for people who feel rushed. So are there any favorite products that you love to recommend?
yeah, I wrote my anti-inflammatory book really with my folks that have chronic conditions in mind, my folks that are going through cancer treatment, my folks that have
Mhm.
autoimmune conditions, my folks who it's hard to stand or use their hands for a long period of time, my folks that are really fatigued or overwhelmed. So the book is full of canned beans. Canned beans are the
Mhm.
best. Like open them, drain them, use them,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes.
Canned tomatoes I use a lot of. I also use fresh and frozen fruit a lot. Rice, like those oats, those whole grains that you just keep in your pantry, things that don't even go bad. So, pre-chopped garlic, these kind of foods can be so easy and save you a lot of time.
I agree. Even the bagged salads, the
Yeah.
chopped onions, the
Yep.
and the frozen berries in the freezer all the time, so that you have a plan, a backup plan, an emergency plan is what I talk to people about all the
Mhm.
time. So you just have those things that you can grab together. And I love the Instapot for beans too,
Yes.
and they can freeze and you can make a huge batch and you can repurpose them in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah, and just like, the batching, like you talked about, make extra, make 3 or 4 times extra. If
Mhm.
you're making dinner one night and you have time to make dinner that night, make 2 dinners, right? So I got my soup cooking over here and I'm chopping something over here or sticking something in the oven. So I
Mhm.
save myself
Mhm.
that much time the next day or two. So just thinking about batching and being strategic, adding a little bit of that in can save you hours.
Yes, and I love the idea of the routine of like a shopping day,
Yeah.
a cooking day, a prep day, and then like you're set. Like you said, you're set for the week, pre-prepping breakfast, you know what you're going to have for lunch, so that it's minutes to prepare when it's time to eat because of the way people have structured their time.
Exactly. It really makes a big difference. And it saves you time, but it also saves you stress, like you're talking about. It saves a lot of energy. It saves money.
Yeah, and what we're trying to do is bring that stress down and reprogram the brain that you've got plenty of time to eat,
Yep.
that you're worth eating, that it's
Right.
worth taking the time, and you're preventing yourself from feeling horrible and stressed later by under eating. And I don't think people really think about going too long without eating or getting too hungry. I'm talking about too hungry. We want to get hungry, but too hungry, where you're getting a headache, you're getting lightheaded, you're getting irritable,
Mhm.
that's a form of stress, not eating enough.
It is. And having low blood sugars can be very
Mm.
anxiety producing. And, if you forget to eat or you skip eating or you're working all day and you don't eat, your brain isn't working the way that it needs to be. It doesn't have the energy. And that can be very stressful to the body.
Yes, yes. So, is there anything else with the anti inflammatory diet that feels important to bring up?
Yeah, when people are ready for it and when they're in a good place with their relationship to food, that's when I like to move into, hey, let's look at how much added sugar you have in the diet. Let's look at how much saturated fat you have in the diet. Let's take a look at your sodium levels. So I'll start with adding things in. And when people are ready, and when it seems appropriate, then we can talk about how to alter things to fit their health goals. So I don't like to start with taking things out. I like to start with adding things in and getting the structure down, and then we can move from there into making some tweaks to work on their health goals. But I actually don't lead with that.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting because that's what we always think about is I'm going to see a dietitian and what is she
Yep.
going to take away from me, or what
Yep.
is he going to say that is causing me a lot of angst to go, maybe why I'm putting it off.
Yep.
But it can naturally start to come down. People's sodium can naturally start to come down, added sugars, everything can start to naturally come down if they're following the principles of a plant-based whole foods approach. What about
Mhm.
cost, Ginger? That's something, right now that feels really important to people.
Yeah, I mean, I'm forever telling people if fresh is too expensive, which a lot of times it is, buy frozen, right? If
Mhm,
you see
mhm,
beans on sale, buy
mhm.
20 of them, right? Buy in bulk section. Like open that container and get all the oats, right? Or all the rice. So I think we just need to be strategic with utilizing fresh processed fruit foods and buying things on sale, buying things in bulk, planning ahead so that you have less food waste.
Wonderful. All right. Well, I also just want to put another plug in for what is really important when you go see your practitioners, that you feel like you have your agenda, that your agenda is being followed, not just your physicians or your dietitians, that you're being asked about your understanding and your applications of principles, that you feel like your behavior is not being taken personal, that you're not feeling judged, that you can express how you're feeling without feeling like somebody's just trying to fix it for you. And also just having that open conversation potentially right at the get-go. This is the type of relationship, this is the type of appointment that I need today. And so that you feel like you can speak your truth without feeling like you're going to be judged, and that you can get that calm, consistent, and comforting care while also, knowing the information. If you do not follow through, with taking your medications, this is what you can expect. If you're not changing your bed schedule and I'm hearing what's happening, I'm not sure, like you said, the blueberries are going to help, that what we see is, from my experience, this is what's happening. So you feel like you're getting an honest conversation with, then again, it's up to you, that you get to make the choices in the end. Is there anything else you want to add?
I just feel so strongly also that we have a weight bias issue in our medical system. So, if your doctor only wants to talk to you about weight instead of all the other things you want to talk about, that's a time to educate them, let them know how you're feeling, and probably even find a new physician if that's really their focus, because every person deserves care, no matter the size of their body.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate you saying that, or any diagnosis where there might be some kind of shame around it, whether or not it's talked about universally, but you're feeling it, is that you should be able to come in and be able to talk about another aspect of your care, and not have to talk about your weight if you're coming in and you're wanting to, have someone take a look at your lungs or take a look at, your ankle, that then it doesn't become about your weight. If there's an association, then it can be a part of the appointment, but that focus. And I think people then, again, lie to their doctor, but then also avoid getting the care that they need. And that's the biggest concern for me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I see it all the time. So yeah, I'm really glad we're talking about this, because it is about advocating and finding the right practitioner. Yep.
It really is. It really is. And it's important, even if it feels daunting these days, and it's difficult to find a good doctor or find someone who has space in their practice, it's worth continuing, so that, this is your life, this is your body, this is your lifetime. So advocating for yourself, and always asking friends and family, about their experiences. And it's not, again, that it's universal, but it's really helpful to get that word of mouth.
Yeah. I always have my recommendations that I send my clients. So absolutely. I'm so glad we had this conversation. It's so important, and it's all connected in really interesting ways.
Yeah, I agree. And Ginger, do you want to talk about your book just really quickly so people know about that as a resource?
Yeah, I'll share it down below in the comments.
Okay,
It's the
perfect.
Anti-Inflammatory Diet meal prep book. And so it's about anti-inflammatory diet, but meal prepping so that it's easy. It's, designed for people that have chronic conditions, people that want to eat healthier, and people that want to get their kids and teens in the kitchen, because it's pretty simple. And yeah, it's helped a lot of people bring their blood sugars down, bring their, blood pressure down, feel better, just feel like they're eating healthier in an easier way. So I get lots of messages. So if anybody has one out there and you've had some success, definitely drop me a message and let me know, because I love hearing those success stories.
Wonderful. It's such a great resource. I appreciate you sharing it. And thanks for talking today.
Yay. Let's do it again soon.
Yeah, that sounds great.